This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Brine Field Services Company, Zolandez. Check them out at zolandez.com. That's ZELANDEZ.com. Hi, it's Joe Lowry. Welcome to another episode of the Global Lithium Podcast. Today is episode 170. My guest is Iggy Tan, the former CEO of Galaxy Resources, the current non-executive chairman of Lithium Universe, and he also serves as managing director of Alltech Chemicals. I have known Iggy for about 15 years, going back to his early days at Galaxy. But Iggy's legacy in lithium goes back further than that. It goes back to the mid-90s in Western Australia at Greenbushes, and you'll hear more about that in the body of the podcast. If there are visionaries in the lithium industry, Iggy Tan is certainly one of them. Many of the ideas he had during his tenure at Galaxy were too early, but it seems for many of the concepts he had, the time has finally come. Given we were both speaking at an event last week in Sydney, it seemed like a good time to record an episode I've had in the back of my mind since I started the podcast. One digression before we get to the episode. I'm going to recommend, if you're interested in the EV world, that you read Walter Isaacson's book about Elon Musk. I was amazed at how much of Elon's thinking, particularly about the way he talks about lithium, become really clear when you read the book. It's an excellent primer as to how Elon's brain functions and his approach to obstacles that get in the way of his ambitious goals. With that said, and without further ado, Iggy Tan. Iggy Tan, welcome to the Global Lithium Podcast.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for having me. So it's been a long time, but great to be here.
You are one of the legends of the industry. You were at least a decade ahead when you were with Galaxy, when you were trying to do things then that are now just coming into being. But since you've been out of the industry for a decade, let's get your backstory.
Yeah, so thanks, Joe. I guess my family's from Singapore, and I actually grew up in Christmas Island, and I came to Australia when I was 12. I studied in Australia, and I graduated from the University of Western Australia. I went into the titanium dioxide industry for 11 years, and then in 1994, I went to Greenbushes. I started at the same time as my good friend Pat Scullin. He ran the tantalum side, and I ran the lithium side of Greenbushes. And my first job was to commission the first lithium carbonate plant in Australia. And it was actually a soda ash pressure process. And the day I walked in, I thought, well, the calciner is undersized and there'll be a lot of problems, and there were. So it was a time also SQM, if you remember, SQM halved the price of lithium carbonate when they came online. So that put a lot of pressure on that project, and then eventually it just stayed in care and maintenance.
For the listeners, for the history of the industry, this goes back almost 3 decades. Did Itochu put the money in for that? Were they the Japanese investor? Yeah. I remember that well because Harold Andrews, who was like an industry legend and the first guy running lithium operation I worked for, had flown down. He was retired by then, and he had said that process is never going to work.
Well, I also thought that, because essentially it's a pressure leach process. We had a lot of precipitation and so on. So, and from that I learned that never to be involved in a project, Joe, that you're not involved in the design of it. So,
when people think of Greenbushes, they just think of this massive spodumene mine. And I think maybe the record isn't clear to people that Western Australia did try to become a lithium chemical producer much, much earlier than people think.
Absolutely, yeah.
When did you leave that operation and what did you do next?
Yeah, so I left the operation, then my friend Pat took over the lithium side, and I went into mineral sands. I ran Iluka in the Midwest, then went into nickel, went into other areas, and then eventually back to lithium with Galaxy Resources.
We are going to deeply examine your tenure at Galaxy. So who started Galaxy?
Yeah, it was already a listed company, and they had the Mount Cattlin asset. So I was involved, and basically we really fast-tracked that project. So I think most projects go from maiden to the first product out is between 8 to 10 years. But we did Mount Cattlin in 3 years. And the reason we did that was really we skipped the scoping and the PFS and went straight to DFS because we already knew what we had to build. We came from Greenbushes. So, and we did that in 3 years. So the guys, our team was fantastic. It was all about culture, all about doing things at the same time rather in sequential. And when you have great culture and great teamwork, that's what you can do. We started the Mount Cattlin project. And Joe, if you remember, the price of spodumene was $260 a tonne. And my friend Anand Sheth, when I got him involved, he said, your head grade is actually what Greenbushes throw out in tails. So what I realised that to actually get into the business, so, I realised the demand coming from really China, and you would see that with the 15-year plan in China, they had a long-term plan essentially to take pollution out from the cities, and you had millions of scooters going around everywhere with these lithium-ion batteries. So that was really the demand that was going to come from. So we had to get into production, and I realised that the only way to actually compete with Greenbushes is to go downstream and to build a lithium carbonate plant. So that's the plan. Of course, we had an option of building the lithium carbonate plant in Australia, but at the time, I think Australia didn't really understand the downstream side chemicals, so we thought we would have trouble raising money.
Some would say that's still true.
We thought we would have trouble raising debt for the project, and so the go-to was actually go to the country that actually understands that demand, and so China was really it. So that's where we started to search for a site to build the lithium carbonate plant in China.
Let's put the years in context. So Mount Cattlin, the build was in what years?
So we had a maiden in December 2007 and started construction in August 2009. And we got our first product out in October 2010. So it's a 3-year time frame.
I think a lot of people that watched what you did had the perception that you wanted to be in lithium chemicals and then needed a spodumene asset. But what I'm hearing you say is that you were trying to build another spodumene asset, and then because it was a much lower quality asset than Greenbushes, to stay in the game, you would need to make lithium carbonate.
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay.
And if you think about our head grade, 1.1%, what was the head grade at Greenbushes? Close to 3%. So that's how we had to compete with them.
So Iggy and I have some commonality here. Once he decided to build this carbonate plant in China because I was building a organolithium plant in a town called Zhangjiagang. Zhangjiagang is a second or third tier city, depending on who's saying what, but it's not very far from Shanghai. It has a very strong chemical park legacy. And I had picked that site after looking at many for our plant, and lo and behold, I hear that this gentleman, Mr. Iggy Tan, was coming to town to build a lithium carbonate plant. And the first time I went over to check it out, I was barred from the property. But eventually, I met Iggy, and we'll pick up the story. When did you start construction on that?
Yeah, so we started groundbreaking on February 2010, and construction really sort of took off by May that year. And we completed by December 2011 and really achieved steady state by May 2012. So that really is 2 years. Now, when you compare the lithium hydroxide plant in Kwinana, it's already taken 5 years, and they only announced they produced 196 tons in the last quarter, so they're only 8% of capacity. So, and once again, it's really about the team. It's the team that we have, the culture that we had, and the ability to just be very nimble and to just move quickly. So that really is the key for me.
And so who were the key members of your team?
Let's start with Mount Cattlin. Terry Stark, who was general manager of all the assets, including James Bay and Sal de Vida. Roger Pova, who ran the operation. He also had a background in Greenbushes. Dr. Jinwan Liu is the go-to lithium expert.
One of the few people that has actually declined an invitation to be on the Global Lithium
Well,
podcast.
I think he will come. I'll have a word with him. But he is the go-to expert in hard rock lithium carbonate or lithium hydroxide. He was my right-hand man. And we had key people. We had John Loxton, who helped build the plant from Hatch and so on. So a lot of key people that had a really, today, a lot of knowledge in that area. As you know, this is quite a young industry, Joe, and there's not a lot of people that have that background.
Well, one of our early meetings, I can remember saying to you, that plant is never going to be able to run with Mount Cattlin feed. And you were not impressed by my analysis. But subsequent to that, you got into production. And how did the transition happen to shutting Mount Cattlin down? And take us through those years.
Well, so one of the lessons learned is that we relied on a lot of our metallurgical test work. So when we developed Mount Cattlin in the DFS, they were saying that we could produce 6.3% grade coming out of there with something like a 79% recovery. And so I sort of tapered it back and said, look, let's assume we get 6% grade.
And you were seriously going to tell me that you were the voice of reason?
Yeah, I was the voice of reason. But what really happened, the lessons learned, is that when you get into the ore body, it doesn't perform obviously as some of the samples that you're trying to take at it. And so essentially Mount Cattlin was probably a 60% recovery and battling to get 5.5% grade. Now, whilst we say, that is not a great number, but today, Mount Cattlin produced 960 million in revenue and an EBITDA of nearly 800 million for Alchem at a 5.3% grade. So I guess it's all about timing and pricing.
It's about timing. I was going to say we're mixing metaphors a little bit here because you're comparing a world where the price of spodumene was in the first digit was a 2, but there were only 3 digits involved. It's a 10x to 15x price differential, which has made all assets good. But I'm not here to denigrate your mind. You had so many ideas that the battery industry loved. Things like traceability to the bag and EV grade and just things. People laugh then in the industry, but the customers love the ideas.
Yeah. Well, I guess I came from the TiO2 industry, and in the TiO2 industry, you're looking at 99.99% quality. So, and I realized for batteries, any impurity in the battery is going to cause some problems to the battery. So if you look at the vision of where batteries are going to go to, you realize that the quality of the lithium carbonate had to be better and better. So that's when we decided to call it EV grade at 99.9% as the EV grade. And I think you thought that was.
I was one of the naysayers, but we don't need to belabor that. We were always friendly.
Yeah.
And
there was a lot of respect. I think it was a small industry, and we respected everybody, to the point that I even invited all our competitors to our opening ceremony in Jiangsu.
Let's talk about some of the other interesting things you did. I mean, you bought Sol DeVito while you were at Galaxy. Tell us about how your vision for aggregating a large or numerous assets under one roof.
Yeah, so
where were you going?
You're correct. I mean, I think at the time there was always a belief that the brines were cheaper. We knew that the quality probably wouldn't match the hard rocks because of certain impurities. So I sort of realized that we need to have a whole portfolio of hard rock versus brines. So we acquired Lithium One with the Sol DeVito project, and also the James Bay project in Quebec.
So who did you negotiate with? Paul Matisic or?
Yeah, Paul and Martin Rowley was the chairman there. Yeah.
And how did that go?
Oh, it was good. It was we did the deal, and it was all good.
Yeah. So the listeners who don't really know the history of the industry, Iggy was involved in what now has become new again in the scheme of multi-asset company, multiple jurisdictions, and now we hear about James Bay all the time. And we're going to get to how Iggy is returning to the industry, but first we're going to find out how you left.
Well, to be fair, I think I was burnt out, and we had an accident and we lost a couple of people, and that really sort of knocked me around. So I knew I was going to get mentally ill if I don't do something about it. So that's when I exited. It was time to go. And
what year was that?
2013, yeah. So it was, yeah, I was burnt out, basically.
When you left, where did you go?
I did something with iron ore in Nigeria, and then went to Alltech Chemicals and focused on a high purity alumina project, and which now is morphed into a alternative battery systems, and we've got a project in Germany and so on.
But you're watching, during that time, I'm assuming you're watching the lithium industry from afar. You had great ideas that didn't come to fruition then. One of them was a lithium association. I can remember when you started talking to people about it, and you didn't get any support from the incumbents.
Did I get any support from you?
Yeah, I actually said, why can't we have an industry association? Yeah. I was in the Greece Association, several different associations, and I said, I think it's nonsense that you can't put a legal framework in there that would allow that. But I wasn't calling the shots at FMC Lithium at the time, so I did put my 2 cents in. And I told everybody, this guy is an interesting character, and it's not character in a... People always say it's better to have character than to be one, but in your case, I think it's both. I went around the world, and people would ask me about Iggy Tan, and I said, Iggy Tan is the P.T. Barnum of the lithium industry in a positive way.
Thank you.
And when you decided to come back to the industry, and tell me what your thought process was and how that came to be, and then we'll get into specifics.
I do remind you, Joe, we had a lunch in Perth, and your words were, you just need to come back to the lithium industry, and that's the only reason I'm back here, Joe. You told me to, and I'm here.
Your gift for Pai Ma Pi is incredible. Pai Ma Pi basically is the Chinese term for butt kissing. What year is it that you get the inkling that lithium prices are high, everybody's getting back in the game? You have experience, you know the industry, but what tipped your hand and got you back in?
Yeah, I think you mentioned about whether I kept with the lithium industry. I didn't really. I didn't follow. And obviously, with friends like Adnan or Jinwan, you get snippets of it. Look, it has been a tough 10 years. I mean, it has been low times, and your interviews with Ken and so on, I feel for that. I know when you get to those times, and of course, we're riding on a nice high at the moment. But as you say in your presentation or your talks, the demand has always been there, but now it's an exponential. It's really coming in, and like you, I'm worried that the lithium sector won't be able to keep up with it. I'll give you an example. Tianqi, they bought the Jiangsu lithium carbonate plant. Well, that's 20,000 tons, so that's operating at above design because the design is 17,000. The next plant is back to Shihong, which is a 16,500, and after that, they haven't got any other production besides Kwinana. So, and that's taken a long time. So, and I got interested with this project in James Bay. I think it's a great area. As you say, there may be challenges in permit, but if you approach it in a different way and you do a lot of the work concurrently, we think you can actually get projects up and running. For example, a company won't start the environmental process until they get to DFS, and then they're going to build a project, and then they start the environmental. Well, you can actually start the environmental on day one and do your background studies, which takes 2 years. So you've got to think smart around those things and run those things in parallel.
Well, that's pretty typical of your thinking, though. You've really never done anything the way everybody else does. I mean, that would be if I had to assess your career in the industry in a couple of sentences, that would kind of be where I would go.
Is that undisciplined?
During your first tenure, who were the people that you learned from in the lithium space?
So one of the philosophies is we acquired everybody that knew lithium. We were an incoming. We had all the old guys from Wan Chaoyi, and they couldn't speak English. There was old technology, but we grabbed them. You can name everybody in the lithium space. I would have employed them because we needed to suck every bit of experience we had. Michael Tamlin, Anand Sheth, and anybody that had a lithium experience, we sucked them all in because we wanted to have a good go at this. Because there's always a risk when you're trying to build technology. Now, Jiangsu plant is today operating above design, and it's really the money maker for Tianqi. It nearly $1.5 billion of revenue came from the Jiangsu plant. It was the first Western-style continuous processor, because the Chinese plant tend to be batch processes. So when they saw this technology and they saw the size of the kiln, they said, "Oh, it's not going to work." There were a lot of people that said it wasn't going to work. So.
Okay, so you've built this plant in Zhangjiagang, which, just for context, people, that's about I lived on the northwest side of Shanghai, and it took me about an hour and 15 minutes to get to the exit, and then it took me another half an hour to get over to where the plants were. And the market at the time, you were going to be a higher cost producer because of the resource you had. But what was your thinking on where the market was going, and were you like many of us who thought maybe the EV thing would take off sooner than it did?
So what do you mean about the market is in pricing or the demand?
The demand goes to price, because once demand ramps and people aren't ready, and that's one of the points I make in my presentation, is the lithium industry wasn't ready for the energy transition. But how were you thinking about it? Because you built a big-ass plant and didn't spare any expense.
17,000 tons. I don't know whether you remember, the market of China was about 35,000 tons at the time.
Yeah, and there really wasn't that much capacity conversion capacity yet inside China.
But really looking forward with the 15-year plan from China, all these electric scooters around, and I thought the demand was going to be. And I think your point was there has been some false starts. All right.
Yeah.
So there was always the demand there, and then it didn't go. It takes a while, and so on. So and that's why it affected the pricing and so on. But so far, demand hasn't changed. It's always been there. All right. Nothing has shifted. But today probably more an escalation curve.
Well, in the interest of full disclosure, when I left FMC, one of the first phone calls I got was from Iggy, and I was an advisor to Galaxy, and I actually sold some of that product, and I didn't have any trouble selling it. The quality was good.
Yeah.
And I sold it in Korea, and I sold some in the U.S., and then unfortunately, life being as it was.
Well, which comes back to the first statement. If there's any people that are experienced in the industry and there's opportunities to grab them, you grab them. And that was why we grabbed you. You're one of the famous guys in Asia Pacific.
With the most specialized team of lithium brine professionals in the world, Zelandes is dedicated to providing exceptional customer service and support throughout every stage of lithium brine field development and production. From the Atacama to Hombre Muerto to the USA and Canada. Go to Zelandez.com for more information. That's ZELANDEZ.com. All right, so you always liked big names. So your first company is Galaxy, but now you're Universal, shall we say.
Well, Lithium Universe, and there's a bit of a backstory. We tried to use...
And that's where we're going.
We tried to use a Lithium Galaxy as a cheeky way of saying it's Galaxy 2. But we got a legal letter from Allchem saying cease and desist. And so we took the higher ground and said, okay, we'll change it to Lithium Universe because we probably think we could fit more galaxies in a universe.
How do you feel? You were known as a guy who made big statements. You have a big personality. I think most of the people during the era where you were at Galaxy had a lot of respect for what you were trying to do, but you were early. But now every bit of lithium you can produce is necessary. Everybody knows that. How are you approaching the return?
Yeah, well, you can see the risk in getting these projects up and running. You see two Canadian companies that failed, the Canada Lithium and Nemaska. And you see the lithium hydroxide plant in Kwinana, which comes from a lithium producer, so it's not someone coming into the market. So to minimise that risk, basically we are going to replicate everything we did at Mount Cattlin and Jiangsu. So we're going to use the same design. We got the Lithium Dream Team, Joe. Who was in the 1992 US Dream Team?
Michael, Magic, Carl Malone, the whole bunch.
So we've got the Lithium Dream Team, Joe.
And Iggy, who would be on the Lithium Dream Team?
No, my friend Pat Scallon, who ran Greenbushes for 25 years. Now, if you have hard rock experience, right, Greenbushes is one of the largest operations around the world, the highest grade. He took it from 0.4 million tonnes to 1.4 million tonnes. So we've got Pat Scallon, Dr. Jinwan Liu, the go-to lithium expert in the lithium industry.
The go-to lithium expert that won't be on my podcast.
He will be on your podcast. Dr. Terry Stark, who was GM at Galaxy, Roger Pova, the guys that build it. So we have assembled people that have done it before, built the plants, operated the plants, and have a proven track record. So that's what we're trying to do, and we're trying to build this in Quebec. We've called this the Quebec Lithium Processing Hub, Joe, to get Canada on the map.
You want to make Canada great again?
Yes.
Okay, it's going around. It's going around. All right, so how do you intend to do that? I mean, I think everybody thought it was interesting that you were coming back and that Lithium Galaxy couldn't be used, so you just upped the ante and went to the universe. But in seriousness, how are you trying to move forward what you're doing?
Yeah. We have the Apollo project, which is in between the Patriot Corvette project and Winsome. So we're about 28 k's in the middle of those two. So very prospective ground, and we think we can drill it out and get a resource. But our strategy is to help all the junior lithium miners in the area, because I don't know whether you know, but Canada has now put this foot down on spodumene going outside the country. So they ordered a Chinese company called Sinomine to stop their investment in a Canadian company called Power Metals, and to the offtake of spodumene had to be returned back. So the message is, we don't want spodumene going outside and then coming back to our industry. You need to look at downstream processes. So can you imagine all these juniors that are mining? They've got good skills in exploration, but to then be able to get to concentrating and then get to lithium carbonate, it's very difficult.
Well, let's break that down a little bit, though, because when you say they won't allow it to leave, Sayona is exporting. So
Well,
put the clarification on. What do I not understand about that?
well, all we're looking at is certain actions that's been taken by the Canadian government, and they cite, critical mineral strategy. So we're taking that lead and now saying, okay, well, we have to get the complete solution. The other thing I didn't realise, that the auto industry in Canada is very strong. They produce 1.6 million vehicles every year, and now because they're moving to EVs, it's now critical that their materials feed into that process.
Well, a lot of Americans don't know the cars they buy from U.S. manufacturers. Some of them are made in Canada, so
Exactly.
there's that. Let's just go back to this. So, how does Canada feel about the United States? Your spodumene could go to the U.S. because they're the 51st state in critical metals, and I say that seriously. America wants to treat Canada as a domestic area, so I would think there would be a quid pro quo on that.
Yeah, so if we can actually turn the concentrate to a final product, then that's ideal.
But I don't think it would be in it, because you just said that you were going to do it just like you did it before. So you'd be building a concentrator.
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah. So then the strategy is, can we help the juniors around the area develop their mines? So we have a strategy where we have a 5-year offtake to buy run-of-mine material. And in Australia, that's how a lot of the mines started. They sold their run-of-mine material to China. So essentially the strategy, we give them a 5-year offtake for run-of-mine material. It allows them to develop their mines, brings the cash flow forward. After 5 years, when they want to develop their own concentrator, we would then joint venture with them and build the same concentrator on their site. Because it's been running for 5 years, it's proven, we'll take exactly that, copy and paste, and put it on their site. So then they become concentrator producers.
They're part of your universe.
Thank you, John.
All right.
You should be on my marketing team.
So you're up in the James Bay region.
Yep.
How are you funding this enterprise?
Well, we only got on the boards 5 weeks ago, Joe.
That's a serious question, though.
Yeah.
What's your plan to move this forward?
Okay, we are going to we will start the engineering studies. So we have engineering companies lined up, and we will commence that engineering studies. So essentially, how much does it cost to build Mount Cattlin in Canada, in Quebec? Today's prices at a location that we will tell you. How much does it cost to build Jiangsu lithium carbonate plant in Canada today? And essentially that's the study, which gives you essentially a DFS level on those two plants.
And we're sitting here in September of 2023. What kind of relevant range would you put on the time frame for moving forward?
Well, the time frame is that 23 is this year, and then definitely it'll be 2024 next year.
Yeah, that's how the calendar works.
No, I don't generally run on time frames. We generally go as fast as we can, and this is really the vision, and there's a lot of way to go and a lot of things to line up for that. But essentially, that's our vision.
And for the listener, I really don't want you to think this is a facetious conversation because it's not intended to be. But in terms of, I wouldn't give probably 4 or 5 people that I know the wide berth I will give Iggy and saying when he says some of this stuff and people are rolling their eyes, I said, let's just give him time and see what he does. So that's a level of respect I have for what you've done in the past and hopefully what you can do in the future. But what do you think the critical things that have to go right for this to happen are?
So we've got the team in place, we've got the engineering companies in place, and we'll commence that. We will be starting to talk to juniors and talking about run-of-mine material. Location, we'll be doing a study on where is the best location. Our first choice is obviously on the Trans-Taiga Highway, where we can access LG4 hydropower, and also a great spot where all the juniors can start to feed some of the raw material onto the highway straight to our plant. So that's the long-term vision. And if demand grows from there, then we can build subsequent lithium carbonate plants.
Well, we've seen more than one failure in Quebec. Why are you going to be successful?
Which comes down, well, we've done it before. We are not reinventing the wheel. It's a lithium carbonate plant. It's exactly what we did at Jiangsu. We know all the improvements that were made, and that will be incorporated. So we're not trying to do something different. Mount Cattlin will be the same. The concentrator will be based on Mount Cattlin.
You're going to call it Mount Cattlin?
No, we shouldn't.
You might get a cease and desist letter.
No, it's designed based on that. And essentially all that area is great spodumene. They tend to be large crystals, so quite easy to process. So that's one thing. And I guess the next question is, why has these projects failed around the world? What do you think, Joe?
Well, usually it boils down to the jurisdiction doesn't support building an asset. Talent, availability of talent is an issue, and that's probably where you have an advantage over the average Bear Junior because you have your old team, and I guess you want to get the band back together, and they're all willing to do it. The other thing is we had a long time where you could finance exploration. It was easy to raise $5 million or $10 million, but when it came down to, well, we need $400 million to do this whole thing, the investment money wasn't there. And I think that is much less of a problem now. But let me ask you a couple questions. You may not have thought through every nuance, but you can get all sorts of money now to build IRA compliant material.
Absolutely.
And how are you going to, what's your strategy for going down that road?
Well, it's exactly why it fits in. The funding either from Canada or the US, they need to support projects that support their supply chain. So we're pretty confident that we're going to get support there. And you're right, funding is in a different ballgame today as opposed to 10 years ago. There's such need for it where people are just going to take up all the offtake. So and big players too.
What do you think the industry's biggest mistake has been in the last 10 years?
Look, if you ask me why some projects don't work, and this has been discussion, one of the major issues is that people that are designing the plants, the operators are not part of the design team. So they're generally given off to an engineering company, and there is no input in how the design, from an operability point, from a maintenance point. So it's designed without all those factors, and that's why. And it's not usually the big equipment that is the problem. It's the interconnecting bits that causes the problem. So it's your approach on how you design these plants, and how many of these design teams have a maintenance guy looking at the design and saying, don't put that pump in because, yes, it looks good on paper, but we've never ever operated it. Or, how do we get a crane in there to take this pump out? Those sort of things, to me, is the key of why these projects have a lot of problems. But that's just me.
I had that conversation with Tony Ottaviano last week about why he designed his flotation circuit the way he did, and he explained it. We changed the design because this is much easier to maintain because people didn't think about that in the past, I guess. All right, so you're the last in a long line of Aussies that are trying to go to Canada and make Canada great again, or actually, in the case of lithium, great the first time. Are you going to form an Australian Lithium Association in Canada?
Oh, that sounds like a good idea. Why not?
Why not? And just so listeners know, I mean, if you look at there's some real heavyweight names that have gone to Canada, Iggy being one of them. But you've got Ken Brinsden, you've got John Young and Cam Henry, Chris Evans, my buddy Alex Cheeseman. The Aussies are going to put a big mark on whatever happens in Canada, and I think that's critical because Canada obviously doesn't have the existing talent in the space.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, what has come out of Canada in the last 3 decades? Nothing.
Well, no, but I mean, Canada has destroyed a lot of value for shareholders. I mean, that's kind of.
And so, what is Australia? Nearly 2.3 million tons of spodumene type material going out, and there's a whole bunch of talent that has developed from building these operations. So, it's natural that will then go to us. And it's good for the country. I don't think it's a bad thing.
Okay, I'm going to try to pin you down again. You don't like time frames, but people don't like death and taxes either, but you have to deal with them. Give me a rough number of when you would expect to be building something.
Look, my philosophy. I never give out numbers because there are a lot of things beyond your control, right? So
in this decade?
Of course, in this decade.
Okay, so we just got a number out of you there. We can just start peeling it back.
Yeah. Look, obviously the unknown is the permitting process, right? But based on our proven track record, we think we can fast track a lot of these projects, and so it then becomes permitting. And so our philosophy is let's do things up front. Let's try to reduce that permitting process by getting clever and doing a lot of the work up front.
From a First Nations perspective, who are you dealing with in your particular area?
Yeah, so the Cree, we had a good relationship with them from James Bay from when we had that asset. So our general manager, Terry Stark, visited many times. So we have a good relationship. We understand First Nation issues, so we're not concerned about that.
All right. What topic have I not brought up that you would like to cover?
About happiness. Remember, I talked to you about
we're
happiness.
We're going to get into your books. Well, okay. For those who don't know Iggy Tan, how many books have you written?
2. One on management and one on happiness.
What was the title of your management book? Throw away the performance appraisal.
Ban the performance appraisal.
Okay.
Yeah. It's about building happy teams and throwing out a lot of these systems that were developed that really take you away from the personal management. Do you agree with those? I mean, you used to work with FMC and the big companies. What do you think about these?
The performance appraisal was normally a joke because it was supposed to be a year cycle, and we get down to like, oh, you got to review this person next week. And I will honestly tell you, at FMC all those years, I wrote 90% of my performance appraisal for my boss to then put a couple of things in so they could ding me, so they didn't have to give me a really good raise. I mean, it was the most flawed process I think I was.
Was it a motivating process or a demotivating process?
It was demotivating.
But why does organizations do it if they demotivate all their employees, including management? So why?
Well, it was a burden for everybody because it wasn't managed for benefit. It was managed for really, in the end, I think it came down, there was a large legal component, we have to do this. So
I think the concept that everybody wants to reward individual performance, but our organizations, we don't. We reward team performance.
Well, let's move on to a happier topic, and that would be happiness. So what was your thesis what was the title of that book?
Stop craving happiness.
Stop craving happiness.
Yeah.
And was that some kind of like Zen thing? Just be happy? You just want to be?
Well, I guess I
have to apologize that you never gave me a copy. So
No, but I guess I had depression a couple of times.
Yep.
And from that I did a lot of meditation, and then I was really interested in the idea of contentment and happiness, and I did a lot of research and then started to write a book. And essentially, how can we be contented and happy in this turmoil world we're in? A lot of us have stressful jobs, and how to be able to be 10 out of 10 happy in this environment, and that is essentially the book.
Okay, well, you've got 2 books, you've got a legacy in lithium, you've accomplished other things. What's your wife think about you coming back to the lithium world?
No, she's very supportive and very happy. And I'm only chairing this company, so I have a great team and a young team. So I'm only the chairman.
All right, Iggy, it's time for rapid fire. If you could have dinner with anyone who's ever lived, who would it be and why?
I think the Dalai Lama. I think he's
the current one.
Yeah, the current one. He's a cool guy, and so I like some of the philosophies around that.
What's the last book you read?
The Hungry Caterpillar. Because
Of course it is.
Because I've got a grandchild.
Oh,
and,
okay.
And so
Yeah, okay.
I read that all the time. See.
If you couldn't live in Australia, where would you live?
Well, that's a difficult question. I think somewhere...
We ask difficult questions on this
probably
podcast.
Somewhere like San Sebastian or something like that.
Where's the favorite place you've ever visited?
It's difficult to say, but I mean, when I go to
You
holiday...
seem to be doing a lot of hedging here, buddy.
When I go on holidays, I don't know about you, but I tend to like to stay in one spot, and spend 7 days
chill,
there
chill.
and just get the feel of the village or the culture. And so, yeah, I like San Sebastian. That's
Favorite band?
nice. I like Ed Sheeran at the moment.
Okay. No judgment.
You
No
don't-
judgment here.
You don't like Ed Sheeran?
I'm not a huge fan, but okay. It's your.
I've been to 4 of his concerts, so I think he's great.
Have you ever seen Taylor Swift?
I couldn't get tickets, but I'm a Swiftie as well.
Okay. Newsflash: Iggy Tan's a Swiftie. Favorite movie?
I like the Lady Gaga latest movie. What was it?
Star is Born.
Star is Born. I think I've watched that about 4 or 5 times. It's just brilliantly made.
If you had to pick 5 songs on a playlist that you had to listen to on repeat, what would they be?
Have you heard of Rodriguez?
No.
You have Sugar Man. No. Okay.
No, I'm in a time warp, and my playlist is more 80s and Bob Dylan and Springsteen.
I'm helping out a friend in developing a show around Sugar Man. As you know, Sugar Man Rodriguez made 2 albums in the US.
I have 100% never heard of Sugar Man or Rodriguez.
Well, you search it up. He made 2 albums, complete flops, but it was taken to South Africa. And in Australia, South Africa, and New Zealand, he was bigger than Elvis, Rolling Stones, but he never knew about it. And they finally tracked him down, and he said, "You're famous." There's a documentary called "Searching for Sugar Man." Go watch it. It's a brilliant documentary.
What is the favorite place you've been to in China?
I like Zhangjiagang.
Of course you do. When you go to a seafood restaurant in Zhangjiagang, what do you order?
You know what's embarrassing, Joe? You probably speak more Chinese than I.
I'm 100% sure I do.
Yeah, you. So I have virtually no Chinese.
Yeah.
And I walk around the place. Of course, they speak to me because I'm Chinese.
Yeah.
And I just, and they think I'm stupid or dumb. So now I go back, I go, Ohayou gozaimasu. So then they go, okay.
No, first of all, that's Japanese people, so that he's feigning being Japanese, which he could probably pull off. But I'm just going to tell one story. I was invited to Iggy's plant dedication, as he's already said, and when I dedicated our plant, I made like a 4 or 5 minute speech in Chinese, memorized, but in Chinese, and the mayor said, ting da dong, and so you said it, and I understood it essentially. And when Iggy came out to do his, Anad Sheth had come out, and we've already referenced Anad. He's been on the podcast, the president of the International Lithium Association. He said a few words in Chinese, and it's an Indian guy, and he's saying Chinese, and they go, okay. So Iggy comes out, and of course he looks the room over in his style, and he looks up and he goes, how you going? And I remember how many hundred people were in there. I'll start looking at, is that Cantonese? Because they knew it wasn't Mandarin, but they thought it wasn't English either. So that is my Iggy Tan moment. So Iggy, that's the longest rapid fire I've ever done with a guest. You took it well. Thank you very much. And thank you for being on the Global Lithium Podcast.
Finally, great to be here, Joe. Thank you for an enjoyable
And I
time.
want you to deliver Jingwan Lu. And there you have it. Episode 170 is in the books. I had intended to have Iggy on for quite some time, even before he decided to come back with Lithium Universe. Iggy's a significant part of the Australian lithium history as far as I'm concerned, and it's going to be interesting to see how his current venture works out. We recorded this 1 week ago today in Sydney. I am now back in North Carolina. I always make it clear I don't give investing advice on this podcast, but I have to say the correction or the decline in many of the lithium equities should give you some motivation to look at buying at bargain prices. Of course, whether you think it's a bargain or not depends on several factors, one of which would be what you think future pricing is going to do. I think that even if the price stays near the cost curve, it's still a really good ride for the top 6 or 7 lithium players out there. I will continue to watch it, and more than likely will be adding to some of my positions in the coming days. Again, not investing advice, just giving you my perspective. Thanks again for listening.